our next speaker, Bernard Laurendeau from Laurendeau and Associates, who's going to talk about frog economy. Bernard, what is frog economy? Can you give us an insight?
Yeah, so first of all, Igor, thanks for having me. So I guess I have 15 minutes, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Right, I'll try not to do it the African time way. Try to skip to stick to those 15 minutes. So let me try to share my screen here. And I think, you know, before we actually try to answer that question, Igor, I also want to kind of explain. I want to kind of put things in perspective for folks who are joining us from outside of Ethiopia, in terms of, you know, what is the Ethiopian economy looking like and why is this leapfrogging necessary? And so we put this thing together. It's a fact sheet for folks who are, you know, willing to set up shop in Ethiopia for any delivery centers or you know, ITO or BPO, business process outsourcing, or knowledge process outsourcing type of services. And so, you know, in Ethiopia, we have about 110 million people, and you know, between now and 2050, it's going to be close to 200 million. So we need to create, we've done the math, about 10,000 jobs per day, per business day. So it's a really massive undertaking. The other thing here is the fact that, you know, 70% of the population is less than 30 years old. So it's a very youthful population. It's kind of an asset in a way, because this is a youthful population that can really quickly adopt new technologies, new trends, new ways of doing things. But we need to create jobs for these people, right? And when you look at the talent that's graduating every year here in Ethiopia, we have a lot of folks graduating with STEM degrees. And so it kind of creates that human capital that, again, we need to harvest. So now coming back to your question, and this is available on our website, coming back to your question around what is the frog economy. So, you know, we're trying to cast a wide net in terms of looking at the gigs economy, freelancing, and then outsourcing. And that's why we put it all together and called it the frog economy. I don't know if you guys can see my screen.
Yes, we can. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's pretty small. Yeah, if you can maybe zoom it a bit.
Can you see this?
Okay.
The
way
frog?
better. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So frog stands for freelancing, outsourcing, and gigs. And so altogether, it's the frog economy. To be honest, it's also because it rhymes with leapfrogging. So I think it's a good thing that we're having this discussion here on this day for leapfrogging in Africa. So again, you know, what are the objectives of this whole frog effort that we've introduced here in Ethiopia? Number one is to really create those linkages between the freelancing, outsourcing, and gigs. And I'll come back to it in a second in terms of why does it make sense to connect the dots. There are a number of areas in the economy where, you know, freelancing, outsourcing, and gigs can really penetrate. And so we need to harvest all of those different sectors. And in all those different sectors in Ethiopia, there is definitely a growth and economic expansion. And so, you know, for instance, the gig economy can show up in the agriculture, in the telecommunication, logistics, and what have you. Same thing for freelancing, right? When you look at freelancing, you could really provide services in all kinds of sectors. The third aspect here is the fact that there needs to be definitely an inward-looking type of effort where we need to harvest that growth and expansion within the country, but also definitely, you know, plug into the global economy. So attract global players and make sure that we can cater to that global demand. The fourth one, which is really relevant for this discussion, is using the power of digital. right? So in everything that we do and explain here with this frog economy, the idea is to use not just digital technology, but digital type of methodologies too. So for instance, using Agile, DevOps, and those kinds of things. And then the fifth one, I guess, is also like around, making sure that folks are aware, and not just folks in the larger population, but also within the government are aware that this is something that has a really strong promise for jobs creation. And this is why it's needed, right? It's because now going back to connecting the dot to what I was saying earlier, when you look at freelancing, outsourcing, and gigs, it really has that power to create millions of jobs, right? There was a study that came out in Kenya last year, and the study basically showed that in 2 years in Kenya, they were able to create 5 million gig worker jobs. And out of those 5 million, 80% came through a digital platform. So when you look at especially the services sector here in Ethiopia, there's definitely room for growth. But I want to come back here to why does it make sense to really connect the dots, right, between freelancing and outsourcing and gigs, right? I'll try to illustrate that with an example. Here in Ethiopia, we have about now 30 taxi hailing apps and companies. And so what they're doing is basically creating gig worker type of jobs, right? So basically they're playing in the transportation arena of the gig economy, but they're really creating gig jobs. But here in Ethiopia, because it is difficult to automate everything through the app, through the digital platform, that taxi hailing company also needs to have a call center. So that call center over time, as it becomes more and more mature, can be lifted and shifted, right, to a maturity level where they can really now cater to outsourcing type of demand, whether it be locally for onshore or domestic, or also for offshore, right? So let's say someone tomorrow in Connecticut, US, has and I was actually yesterday, we were on a call with executives from the US, and they're interested in actually setting up shop in Ethiopia, where they could perhaps have a delivery center or maybe even a contact center here in Ethiopia. So now this taxi hailing app can really turn that call center into a business and maybe cater to that entity in Connecticut, right? It doesn't have to be Connecticut. It could be someone in Egypt who's willing to have that time zone advantage and work with someone in Ethiopia for labor arbitrage, right? Simply because the labor here might be, and we have those also figures listed out in the previous infographic, but maybe for labor arbitrage purposes, want to stay within the same time zone, but also make some savings, right? But then as this business then fast forward a couple of years later, and as this business matures, maybe the client, whether they be domestic or local or global one, wants to automate a piece of that contact center. Now this firm needs to turn into to a freelancing platform. So here in Ethiopia, we also have freelancing platforms. We have a company called, for instance, Freelance Ethiopia, Gebeya. Gebeya is actually kind of the Upwork of Africa. And so they can turn to this platform now and really say, hey, we need to automate some aspects of this contact center, and let's say use some kind of RPA, robotics process automation type of automation, right? So in this case, what they're doing is really now playing in the freelancing world. So the reason why it's really important to connect all the dots here is because, number one, the digital and tech ecosystem here in Ethiopia is still somewhat small. So they need to really start knowing each other, but really from the beginning. So we've put together actually a frog task force where you have folks in the gigs economy, folks in the outsourcing and freelancing. And what that does is, these firms are really starting to know each other. And as they start really knowing each other and understanding the services and stuff, they find synergies. And so what it does is that it really uplifts the ecosystem, but in a very organic way, but not just organic, but almost helps to have that leapfrogging, right? And while they're doing that, they can also really find some synergies and really together cater to that local or global demand, right? And so now coming back to the real topic of today's session, right, is, here in Africa and in Ethiopia particularly, we can really leapfrog. And I know this is a buzzword that's being used, but we don't have to go through the stages, especially for this frog economy, through the stages, for instance, that the outsourcing industry went through in India or in Philippines and what have you. So these are geographies that are very mature now when it comes to outsourcing specifically, and BPO more particularly. And we don't have to follow all the stages. As a matter of fact, we have, it was announced late on last Saturday, that a new license would be issued to a global consortium led by Safaricom. So they're a neighbor based in Kenya. And that consortium is really pitching 5G for Ethiopia. And they're about to create millions of jobs here in Ethiopia, specifically, I believe, with jobs that are related, again, to digital platforms. And so when you look at the power of, this ICT infrastructure that we're going to be able to leverage, when you look at the regulatory environment that's now more and more conducive, and when you look at also specifically, the workforce presence, and now, of course, the tax value addition, Ethiopia really has that potential to leapfrog. And so, tomorrow we could really not just talk about BPO, but maybe even talk about, providing services through some kind of very advanced technology, where basically someone could be almost virtually present in office in Connecticut and provide those services, again, through some kind of very high-speed connection or connectivity, right? But the emphasis here is on the need to really use the power of digital so that we can really leapfrog the different stages that other geographies had to go through. And again, what digital brings is that inflection point, and we can really get to those figures, hopefully, of about 10,000 jobs created every business day here in Ethiopia. Again, if we use digital, because when you look at gigs, if you really want to create a number of jobs, just like the example that I used from Kenya, if you use a digital platform, you can really connect the dots so that someone who's sitting idle in the south of, the capital city of Addis Ababa doesn't have to sit idle, because now they have that information, right? So the digital platform really corrects that that information asymmetry. But on top of that, it really unlocks new opportunities. So the digital is really going to create that leapfrog effect here in the gigs economy. Of course, for the outsourcing, because you can use some of those advanced technologies that I was talking about. But then also for freelancing, what you're doing is not just connecting the dots here locally, but you're also now leveling the playing field so that someone who's sitting, in Hawassa, which is a city in the south of Ethiopia, can now aim. This was almost unbelievable 2 years ago, right? They could aim that person to actually cater to a client sitting in, Tbilisi or somewhere in Connecticut or somewhere in Delhi, right? So the digital aspect here is bringing new opportunities that we could never even think of a few years ago. So this is what I wanted to talk about. Happy to answer any questions. I know we have about 3 minutes. I wanted to keep to the time that was given to me.
Thank you, Bernard. Really insightful. Guys, do you have any questions? Do you want to ask? Feel free to ask via chat or just unmute yourself and ask Bernard a question. I think it was amazing overview of what's happening in terms of outsourcing and the challenges that Ethiopia, and not only Ethiopia, is facing. Any questions? use the chat, or just, as I said, just unmute yourself.
Yeah, and I'll put our link here in case there are any follow-up questions. So thanks again, Igor, for the opportunity, and looking forward to connecting with you in the future as well.
Yeah, well, just someone is asking a question.
Okay.
Sari, do you want to unmute yourself to make it faster instead of typing? Is it easy to get? I'm not sure. I follow the question. Can you see?
Yeah, let me
the chat?
try to interpret that question. I think what the individual here is asking is, Mr. or Mrs. Sari is asking is, in terms of having access to foreign currency as you're providing some of those services. Yes, I think in Ethiopia it is a bit of a challenge. Like, for instance, when you sign up on Upwork, you really need to have and to be honest, I've never really signed up myself. I've been trying to understand for freelancers here how they, because there are Upwork freelancers here in Ethiopia, but I would think that they have, let's say, a cousin or an uncle sitting in somewhere around the world where they can receive that foreign currency for them. But for the gigs platform, that's not the case, because this is all local demand. And then when you look at the outsourcing aspect, it's definitely both, right? Because you have, like, say, for instance, yesterday we were talking with a firm that's established in the US but has operations here in Ethiopia. They're actually about to create about 1,000 jobs here in Ethiopia. And so this is a case where, they're getting access to the foreign currency, but then they also have local currency type of accounts. So I hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you so much, Bernard. Thanks for the insights. Again, guys, there is a link to Bernard's website of his company. So please send any requests or follow-up questions. And I guess if Bernard will stay on the chat, you can still answer the next question that is in the chat, Bernard. Otherwise, thanks for joining, and I'll be in Ethiopia pretty soon. I'll ping you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on.